What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. If you're a regular to the channel, you're familiar with me talking a lot about Savage Worlds. That's because I believe that Savage Worlds is both the most efficient and effective universal RPG system. But if Savage Worlds is the best of the best, what's the best of Savage Worlds? Well, today, you're going to find out. Conan, what is best in SWADE? To ace your rolls, soak your wounds, and to see your advancements stack up before you. If you're a regular to the channel, you already know this. But as there are many new faces every week, it seems important to let you know. These opinions expressed here are just that, my opinions, and as such will result in much wailing and gnashing of teeth. However, keep in mind that they will still remain my opinions. You are more than welcome to your own opinions, and I'd love to hear them in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with my takes. That said, I only respond to civil and respectful commentary. Anything outside of that gets deleted or blocked from the channel, so please keep it positive. Even if you disagree, be respectful when you do so. It should be noted that I receive no financial backing or any support for channel content other than YouTube ad revenue, and I have not received any free materials from Pinnacle Entertainment. Though they are apparently using my Super Companion video on their Kickstarter page for the Sci-Fi Companion, I have no affiliation with Pinnacle Entertainment Group and have had no interactions with them other than as a customer. These opinions are based entirely upon my deep respect and appreciation for the work that they have accomplished with Savage Worlds and specifically with the SWADE Fantasy Companion. If you do enjoy the content, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to continue the conversation with the greatest group of gamers on the planet...
Where are they? I think they're talking about us.
Head on over to Books, Bricks, and Boards University Discord channel. Link in the description. Now with that out of the way, let's talk some Fantasy Companion. The SWADE Fantasy Companion was released by Pinnacle Entertainment Group in 2022 with a writing team of Shane Lacey Hensley, the founder of The Feast, Michael Barbeau, Clint Black, Brian Reeves, and Donald Shepis. Editing was done by Michael Barbeau, Brian Reeves, Donald Shepis, and Gerard Vallier. The graphic design team includes Carl Kiesler, Simon Lucas, and Thomas Shook, with the excellent cover art by Tomasz Tworek. This is a reimagining of the Fantasy Companion written for the earlier Explorers edition of Savage Worlds, which is now much more complete and fully realizes the potential of the Savage Worlds system. Inside this beautifully bound and stitch-sewn book, you will find plenty of brilliant material to mark with its 3 silky ribbon bookmarks. To touch on some of the statistics, this book adds ancestries, edges, gear, magical items, setting rules, setting style suggestions, stronghold rules, a full bestiary, and much, much more. For the MSRP of only $39.99, you're going to get more bang for your buck than anything in the SWADE lineup, and I would argue more than nearly any book in recent memory that isn't named Knave 2nd Edition. This book is going to allow you to fully realize all manner of fantasy and fantasy subgenre games when combined with the SWADE core rules. While there is a considerable amount of overlap and some direct contradiction between what is presented here and in the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds line, I still believe that anyone that is using Pathfinder for Savage Worlds would do well to pick this up, if for nothing else than to have the extra ancestry, edge, and bestiary options. To put it another way, if I wanted to run a Savage Worlds fantasy RPG game and I can only buy one book, I'd pick up Pathfinder for Savage Worlds core rules. But if you tell me that I can buy 2, well, I'd get the Fantasy Companion and the SWADE core rules instead. It is that good that when combined with the core rules, I'd take it over the version of Savage Worlds built from the ground up just to do fantasy. In my home games, playing Savage Worlds on the Sword Coast of Faerun currently, I use all 3, and I find myself pulling from the Fantasy Companion much more than anywhere else. That's an overview of what this covers, but let's dive into some of the details. Within these pages, you're going to find 29 ancestries ranging from the obscure, like insectoids, to the more traditional fare of elves or dwarves and the like. If you can think of a race that's been represented in a fantasy role-playing game over the last 40 years, chances are that some variation, or at least a close facsimile, can be found in the Fantasy Companion. I can tell you that for my part, while doing my Savage Son conversion and trying to create options that would be at home on a certain desert-covered wasteland that has been neglected by its ownership, I found most of my starting points right here in this book. One thing worth mentioning, and something that is actually called out in the book, is that these player races are 2-point creations like found in the SWADE core rules, as opposed to the 4-point ones that are in Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. As a quick fix, if you don't want to dig out the racial abilities chart from the SWADE core rules every time, if you want to play a Fantasy Companion ancestry in a Savage Pathfinder game, just let the player bump an extra attribute up by 1 die type, as that is a 2-point enhancement. Simple. When I was trying to rebuild some of the race options in the Fantasy Companion with the SWADE core rules, I ran into a few with abilities that were not represented, and I am nearly certain that a couple were already 4-point race options despite the note in the book. The half-giant being firmly in this camp. GMs, be sure to look over the options before you give a sweeping approval. I'm good with any of them in my game, but you might not be. You've been warned. After the ancestries, the players are treated to a plethora of new edges with 24 background edges, 10 power edges, 10 professional edges, 1 social edge, 3 weird edges, and 4 legendary edges. And that isn't even including the 14 new arcane backgrounds, with each having special edges specific to their own discipline. You're going to find most of your favorites in here, allowing you to accurately portray knights, druids, swordsmen, archers, artificers, and bards, just to name a few. What's more, some of the options in here are more along the lines of what I would like to play or see in my games than the ones that were offered in the Savage Pathfinder books. Specifically, I am thinking of the Bard and Alchemist from the Fantasy Companion. Overall, if there is a fantasy trope that you're trying to portray, there are options here to make it happen at your table. Beyond the aforementioned options, there are also 31 either new or updated powers available to the arcane backgrounds, with some of them covering favorites from other fantasy role-playing games like Wish, Time Stop, or Summon Undead. One of the greatest strengths of Savage Worlds' power system over a more traditional spell system is in the fact that relatively few options can be used to represent a vast number of similar effects in other games by effectively using trappings and spell modifiers. With that being said, I am still more than happy to see the additions made here, as they are very well done, and in particular with the various summoning spells, offer a more specific manifestation than previously possible. While still discussing the player options in the book, I would be remiss to not bring up the huge variety of armor, weapons, and equipment covering the expected ground of shortbows and longswords, but also the more interesting chakram and spike chains. With a wide variety of common gear and task-specific equipment, as well as the pre-made packs that cover a wide swath of starting gear for different roles, you'll be hard-pressed to find an area that isn't well covered in the efficiently used pages of the gear section. There are even specifics for hirelings and services that can be purchased, as one has come to expect from a standard fantasy RPG, but rarely is covered in a universal system like Savage Worlds. The book also adds specific rules for masterwork items in using rare fantasy materials such as mithril or adamantine in your weapons and armor. If you are the seedier sort and looking for something a little more dangerous, there is a nice little section on poisons as well. Because the Fantasy Companion includes rules for maintaining a stronghold, the gear section has a portion devoted to siege engines too. Last but not least, magic items as presented in this book might be the single best improvement on similar topics that were covered in Savage Pathfinder. The random treasure tables are reminiscent of those we older gamers grew up with in the old Beck Me boxes, and the method to creating the treasures seems much more flexible than what was given in the Savage Pathfinder book. With tons of variety in the weapons, armor, and miscellaneous magic items, one will not be disappointed with the selection, that is for sure. You may be wondering, with all the droning on that I have done over the player options, is this book leaving the GMs out in the cold? Far from it. In my humble opinion, the GMs get the best bits of this book, and that is saying something. I'm going to start with something that seems player-facing, but I believe is really a GM tool disguised as a player reward, and that is the Stronghold.
Hail to the king, baby.
The Stronghold rules in the Fantasy Companion will be similar to what you saw in the Super Companions bases, but updated for a clearly fantasy vibe. Rather than create an accounting minigame, as some domain-level options are wont to do, the Stronghold rules allow simple creation of all manner of strongholds from inns to caves to castles with 4 simple steps. 1. Roll an advantage, something that gives your stronghold a benefit when everything else is equal. 2. Roll a complication, something that's going to be a recurring problem that your players must deal with. 3. Choose a form, be it an abandoned watchtower, a thriving tavern, or a grand palace, whatever seems appropriate to the campaign and the group. 4. Assign upgrades. As the players add advancements to their heroes, they will also be able to update their stronghold with new features that provide mechanical benefits, as well as narrative fuel to make the thing into a character all its own. Of course, every time that they add an upgrade, they will also have an opportunity for an encounter related to the stronghold that will provide ample opportunities for the GM to insert conflict into the story. I think that in keeping these rules simple and fluid, Pinnacle has captured the best of domain play and jettisoned everything that isn't absolutely critical. As the GM, it leaves us with a constant lever to pull to encourage the group to engage with the story we are weaving in the background. Need them to head to a specific region? Tell them that an emissary from that region has sent an invitation to their castle and that refusing to acknowledge it might create an unwanted enemy. Need to give them a reason to go treasure hunting again? Tell them that the foundations of the stronghold are crumbling and that the cost to repair it properly is going to be substantial. But they're in luck because they did just hear a bard sing of a lost treasure just over the nearest mountain ridge. The possibilities are literally endless. The best bit for the GM, in my opinion, however, is Chapter 3, titled Setting Rules. While there are some really interesting additions here, especially those concerning downtime activities, which I am fairly certain other publishers will and possibly already have cribbed for their newest creations, the best parts are in the fantasy styles. These are detailed mini essays on the various subgenres of the fantasy genre, followed by a list of appropriate setting rules to apply to them, as well as extensive lists of examples from fiction and gaming that would be representative of the particular fantasy style. For example, under Sword and Sorcery, it lists Conan, Solomon Kane, Dark Sun, Fire and Ice for you Frazetta animation fans, Beastmaster, and Thundar the Barbarian. That is just one of the 10 different fantasy styles that were listed throughout the chapter, and each one provides a great starting point for your own adventures within these specific IPs. I can tell you that I leaned heavily upon this inspiration whilst building my Savage Sun conversion for one. While that is, in my opinion, the best section for the GM, it won't be the one that sees the most use. No, because that is reserved for the excellent Bestiary. Well, this is the area that has the most overlap with the Savage Pathfinder line and their own separate Bestiary book. This is a phenomenal add in the Fantasy Companion. With over 200 stat blocks covering all of the non-IP related greatest hits and a wide variety of various NPC types, which I found to be sadly lacking in Savage Pathfinder, as well as a few very thinly veiled nods to some of the more famous IP protected monsters. I'm looking at you, observer. Now, whether this floating eyeball tentacle beast and its various gemstones with different spell-like abilities is supposed to stand in for anything that WotC might not have included in the OGL is in the eye of the beholder to decide.
Oh, come on. That was damn funny.
But I certainly see a resemblance to a certain famous monster. Throughout this Bestiary section, you are going to find more than enough enemies to throw at your players for years. Very rarely does an RPG product outside of a core rulebook become must-own. In my opinion, this is a must-own book for any Savage Worlds GM. Even if you aren't planning to play a purely fantasy campaign anytime soon, just as a matter of gameplay inspiration and how to build out edges, monsters, and ancestries, this book should be required reading for any aspiring Savage Worlds GM. If you are a player and playing in any fantasy or fantasy-adjacent game, you're going to want to have this just for the sheer volume and quality of options that it places at your greedy little fingertips.
Nerds! Nerds! Nerds!
That is why the Savage Worlds Fantasy Companion is the best that SWADE has to offer. Those are my opinions, but I'd love to hear yours. Have you looked through the Fantasy Companion? And if not, why not? If you have the book, what are your favorite things that it adds to Savage Worlds? Do you feel like I overstated any of the different aspects of the content herein? If so, where do you think I went wrong? Keep it constructive, but tell me about how I'm wrong. I'd love to hear more about it in the comments. Until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.